A few years back, the idea of a practical rifle started making the rounds in the shooting world. These rifles are usually lightweight, easy to maneuver, and topped with simple, low-magnification optics, often modeled after bolt-action hunting rigs. While the roots of the concept come from Jeff Cooper's famous Scout rifle, the practical rifle isn't locked into any strict blueprint. Instead, it's defined by how well it fits the shooter's real-world needs. Over time, the topic has resurfaced again and again, and while the image of a fast-running bolt-action gun is appealing, there's really not much new to add. The heart of the concept lies in rethinking the bolt-action platform through the lens of personal defense and long-haul survival. That's a cool thought experiment, sure, but for most people it doesn't have a ton of carryover into daily life. Now, if we take the term practical rifle at face value, the most realistic version ends up looking like what I call the backyard sniper rifle. This is a suppressed, bolt-action rifle chambered in .22 caliber, used almost exclusively for pest control. When you've got chickens to protect and vegetables to grow, dealing with critters becomes a regular chore. Sometimes the most efficient method is to quietly take care of the problem. Over the years, this setup has proved incredibly useful for handling everything from rabbits and raccoons to chipmunks and rats. I live out in a semi-rural area, with enough space between properties that shooting is both safe and within the law. But because neighbors are nearby, I keep it as discreet as possible. That's where a suppressed bolt-action rifle in .22 long rifle really shines. There's just not much out there that's quieter. Sure, I've got carry guns and a few firearms set aside for home defense, but thankfully, I've never had to actually use them in a defensive situation. I'll head out to hunt every now and then, but not often enough to really call myself a hunter. Truth is, this little .22 gets used more than anything else I own, and not just for plinking at steel or paper. In that sense, it really earns the title of practical rifle. Let me walk you through the setup and why it ended up this way. The rifle is a Savage Mark II FVSR, chambered in .22 long rifle. I swapped out the original synthetic stock for a laminated wood version from Boyd's, and added a magazine well and trigger guard from DIP, Dovetail Installation Products. Optics-wise, I'm running a Vortex Diamondback 2 to 7 power by 35mm rimfire scope. For sound suppression, it's fitted with a Silencerco Sparrow suppressor. I've also mounted a Streamlight TLR1 HL flashlight using a Blackhawk swivel stud to Picatinny adapter on the front of the stock. A rugged sling from TAB Gear completes the package. Now, some folks might ask why you'd go to all this trouble just to drop a rabbit or scare off a raccoon. Couldn't a beat-up, tube-fed .22 from a hardware store do the same job? Sure. And on the flip side, some guys from the precision rifle world might scoff and call this a low-end setup. Honestly, neither opinion matters to me. This rig wasn't built to impress, it was built to work. And in the meantime, it lets me tinker and test out gear in a way that's still useful. The Savage Mark II line has been on the market for a long time, with a number of variants available. The FVSR version stands out with its 16-inch fluted heavy barrel, threaded muzzle, Picatinny rail, and oversized bolt knob that gives it that tactical flair. I don't care much for the tactical look, but the larger bolt handle is definitely nice to have. The heavy barrel isn't my favorite, but back when I bought this rifle, around 2013, there weren't many factory options in .22 long rifle that came with a threaded barrel. These days, suppressor-ready rimfire rifles are everywhere, but back then, this was one of the few that checked all the boxes. If I had to choose a rifle for this role all over again today, this one would still be a contender, though I'd definitely give a few other models a serious look. At around $260, it delivers quiet operation and decent precision. That said, the original synthetic stock left a lot to be desired. It was molded from thin, hollow plastic, which helped keep the weight down, but made the rifle feel nose-heavy. On top of that, the comb height wasn't high enough to properly line up with an optic, which made aiming awkward. That's why I replaced it with a Pro Varmint stock from Boyd's. The stock came unfinished, so I had to put in the work, staining and sealing it myself. I also trimmed the length of pull to about 12½ inches for a better fit. Back when I bought it in 2013, that stock was a steal at $80. These days, it'll run you closer to $180. On top of that, I had to pick up a separate trigger guard and bottom metal from DIP because the factory ones weren't compatible, which added another $46. At that point, for the total cost, I could have picked up a slightly nicer .22 rifle from the start and avoided all the aftermarket work. Still, despite the added expense and effort, the new stock transformed the rifle. The extra weight actually helped. It improved balance and gave the rifle a more substantial, less toy-like feel. The Savage Mark II works with detachable magazines that hold either 5 or 10 rounds. For range time, I usually run 10-round mags, but around the property I go with the 5-rounders. They sit more flush and make the rifle easier to carry and maneuver. I upgraded to the Vortex Diamondback 2 to 7x35mm rimfire scope just last year. It replaced an older Burris scope with a frustratingly tight eye box. Scopes in this magnification range, 2 to 7, aren't as common these days, but they're still incredibly practical. They're more compact than your standard 3 to 9 by scopes and a lot more affordable than modern 1 to 6 or 1 to 8 power low-power variable optics. The Diamondback's glass isn't top tier, but it gets the job done. At 25 to 50 yards, it lets me tell the difference between a rat's head and a lump of bark, and that's all I need. I only recently added the Picatinny rail and Streamlight TLR1 HL to the setup. I don't keep the light on the rifle full-time. It's only mounted when night critters start messing with the chickens. The light beam isn't perfectly aligned with the barrel due to the shape of the forend, but the beam spread is wide enough that it doesn't matter. The rail is mounted to the forward sling stud using a Blackhawk adapter, which I actually found in a random gear bin in my garage. I don't think Blackhawk even makes that adapter anymore, but GG&G produces a solid equivalent. As for sound suppression, I've been running a Silencerco Sparrow on this rifle for about 9 years. When I picked it up, it was one of the best-rated suppressors for .22 long rifle, and it's still a top-tier choice today. The design hasn't changed much over the years. It adds about 6½ ounces to the rifle's weight, but with subsonic ammo, it makes this thing whisper quiet. Honestly, it's probably quieter than a stapler. While bolt-action and lever-action rifles tend to be a little quieter than semi-autos when suppressed, the gap isn't huge in this caliber. The real advantage of a bolt gun here is better precision at a lower cost. My best results have come from Ely 38-grain subsonic hollow points. On a recent outing, I fired a 5-shot group at 50 yards, and the holes measured in at 3/4 of an inch, with 4 of them practically touching. That's excellent performance for a rifle in this price range. Sure, a semi-auto could hit similar accuracy, but it'd probably need some tuning and upgraded parts. For dispatching pests with a single clean shot, especially aiming for the head, this bolt action has proven extremely dependable. The one real downside is weight. The rifle started out at about 5 pounds, 2 ounces. After all the accessories and upgrades, it tips the scale at 8 pounds, 7 ounces, pretty heavy for a rimfire. If I were hiking through the woods or spending long hours with it slung across my back, I'd want something lighter. But for a rifle that mostly stays on the property, the extra mass is not a major issue. All in all, this setup meets the definition of a true, practical rifle. It handles the jobs I need it to, quietly, accurately, and without fuss, and it's just plain fun to shoot. Add a bipod and it would make a fantastic training rifle for new shooters, especially kids or folks nervous around guns. If you've got a similar rifle tailored to your own needs, I'd love to hear about it in the comments.